Hello, something guys and gals, and happy belated New Year! With me having released another tangent video, I can get back to doing my odd architecture series, if only for one more video until I work tirelessly on my Tales from the Borderlands as a story project. Like with the last odd architecture video related to TF2, I decided to let the community decide on the next map that I should cover in terms of realism. I threw in a wild card, as per the holidays, and I should have expected that people would have me cover it. So now I am tasked with the arduous process of tackling PL Wutville event, or as I like to call it, PL what the fuck were they thinking making this map official? Event, as gameplay wise and aesthetic wise is quite atrocious in terms of gelling with Team Fortress 2's gameplay and aesthetic. But, alas, I have to figure out how to cover this map in a way that only cares about how realistic it would be, so best you believe that I got quite the undertaking on my hands. So, without any more delays, let's figure out the whys of Wutville. Alright, and now we are in the map, and I guess I should have expected that people would have voted for the meme map, considering the infamy of Wutville and everything that comes with it. Regardless, we are still going to try, or I'm going to try my best to analyze this as, in terms of realism as possible. So, starting from blue, just only makes sense to start from blue's side and then just kind of work our way to the last point. We're starting from the left main spawn of blue, and you have this little visual art piece, I guess. I guess it's just to be eye candy, because, I mean, in terms of practicality, it doesn't really make any sense why this is here, and in relation to everything else around this map as well, why this would be uniquely here. So, and then everything else is just not really much to comment on. Like, there's not really anything I could find here that was completely out of the ordinary. There is a little bit of a contrast between some of the architecture inside compared to the outside or outdoor areas of Wutville. That might be a little bit confusing. Like, for example, a lot of the spawns for both blue and red are just reusing the sewer system from CTF2 for it, just down to the fact that there's these lines here, which will cause a bit of a dissonance between the idea that this area gets flooded often with these lines here, because these lines are usually supposed to imply that the water gets up to this level. But obviously these were just used as placeholders for tunnels, so to speak. So we'll go to the left main spawn before we cover everything around this. And the left main spawn is basically just this little tiny dome with this kind of extruded tunnel. Which again is just more of CTF2 for its sewer system, and again, not anything out of the ordinary here in terms of its design. I do find it odd because usually spawns in 2 Fort usually have lockers to imply like the 9 mercenaries would store their stuff there, but there is no lockers here. It's just a refrigerator for some reason, a trash can, and punch-out cards. And a punch timer, obviously. I just thought that was kind of interesting of a note. So, going out from the left main spawn, we have this sign that says "Welcome to Wutville." I don't think this is actually in the official version of TF2. I think this is just a blank wall, because this looks really tacky as like a sign, so to speak. But this odd, shed thing is surprisingly cohesive, because you have this door into this little, I don't know, checkpoint room area, and this door actually does match with this door here, although there is some geography that's not, detailed, so who knows, maybe this might be incomprehensible, but no conflicts there, surprisingly enough. And then, now we have to address the elephant in the room, which is the entire design of this area is supposed to be aesthetically a mirror to How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and more specifically the 2000 Jim Carrey movie, especially with the fact that a lot of the color in this area is a lot more muted, and there's like this kind of smoggy undertone in this map as well as the movie. If you watch it, like, you'll notice that some of the colors are quite muted despite how much they put into the set design and whatnot. So a lot of this is impractical for the sake of impracticality, which is kind of half the problem with me covering this map, is that I can't just be like, oh, well, that's these trees, for example, these giant tinsel trees would just, there's no way you'd be able to have ornaments of this size or tinsel of this size or whatever, you know? Because obviously it's just supposed to be, like, over the top in terms of its design, like in the Dr. Seuss special, as well as these, you know, railless stair archways, as I call them. Like, obviously this would be an absolute this would be a nightmare to try to walk across, like, walk over. Like, you know, a hard breeze would be quite a danger, but obviously it's not supposed to necessarily be practical in that sense. It's just supposed to be like, oh, it's artistic and whatnot. But there'll still be plenty of stuff for me to scrutinize in this map, regardless of the fact that all of this is pretty, you know, just artistic. For example, and I'm just noticing it now, is we have a variety of these windows, I would say. And some of them are buried into the ground for some reason. Like, this one's almost, like, they're almost designed, like, oddly in, like, a 90-degree angle for some reason. And, like, you can see that the snow is not really that deep, because you can see some parts of the concrete, and the rails also are built essentially on top of the snow, so why they would design windows that are halfway into the ground like this, I don't know. And this will be more noticeable as we go on. Another thing that's also odd is you have, I think these are supposed to be doors that are kind of themed around TF2 with the TF2 logo, but a lot of them basically wouldn't go to anything, especially with the fact that a lot of these buildings are, there's just not a whole lot of geometry to work with behind them. Like, especially the fact that, like, you know, you have this tree here that's colliding with this, or this wrapped building and whatnot, or this door that would just basically go to nothing. And another thing I noticed too is, if you notice, going out of bounds, there's a lot of things that are just kind of poking out of bounds, which possibly is one of the reasons why this map runs notoriously bad when you actually play in TF2, because of these assets that have to be loaded in, despite the fact that nobody can reasonably see them. So I just thought that was an interesting thing of note. And then, in terms of the, you know, the thematic goofiness of this, the lights are structured like this. Like, they kind of look like either they're trying to go for, like, a stovetop, a top hat, or, like, a smokestack style. Like, the tops of these trees are supposed to be these giant, like, top hats. Now, like, I get that this is supposed to be aesthetically, like, of this style, but if this was designed this way, the lamp or light would be bending downwards because of the weight of this bearing on kind of a single point. But these would not be structurally sound. They would start to bend and crease over time. But they're patterned throughout, so you're gonna have to make do with it. And then going on into Red's first... Oh, that is not Red's first spawn. That is just a small little embankment. Before we go into Red's first spawn, there is the first flank of this map, which, yeah, there's surprisingly very few flanks, and a lot of them are very signposted, because it's just more of these TF2 or CTF2 fort servers, just sewers, just copy pasted for effect. And as you can also tell from the design of this flank, it is not in the slightest way similar to the aesthetic of the outside. It's very clinical, very industrial, and not to mention also still using Half-Life 2 textures over TF2 textures. I really do need to get that mod that one commenter mentioned in a prior video to fix this when I do cover TF2 maps. Although that might not be for a while now, but still just something to keep in mind. So yeah, you have a lot of this that's just kind of jiving really badly with the way that the outside looks. Like, as though they couldn't really be bothered to make this... Well, either they couldn't be bothered to make this look like the outside, or the implication is that the outside is bullshit and this is what it really is. Like, underneath all the glitz and glam of it. But even so, like, the fact that a lot of these flanks have just these sewer openings would imply this area gets flooded, especially with this drainage ditch texture here. But it doesn't really coincide with the fact that you have these stairs here, you have this weird chute thing that's doing nothing, as well as this ramp, for some reason, to an area that would probably be flooded. But likely it's probably not flooded very often. So, going on, well, going back a little bit, we're going to go to Red's first spawn, and Red's first spawn is a dome. And this is going to be very apparent. All of the spawns in Wutville are basically this, just a cylindrical dome with either a small tunnel or just a circle. A circle for the mercenaries to just fall in on, which is also very notorious for being spammed in because of the fact that you just spawn right here and you can just be shot down from. The only other thing of note here is you have these two realistic vents up here right above a vent grate that is human-shaped below, which is kind of odd why that would be here. I mean, beyond the fact that these wouldn't be going to anything, because obviously it's not really textured beyond, as well as the design of everything else here is just an oddity. Another thing, too, I noticed is to the top right, out of bounds of the first red spawn, is this angular pipe that is doing nothing. I don't know if this is supposed to be a chimney, a chute, or just a pipe. In fact, there's a lot of pipes used throughout. You thought the tinsel trees were being used? I think there are more pipes like this, just kind of smattered around, as well as the stairless archways. Like this one I just noticed now is not even... It's just colliding in here between this tree, this bunker of snow, and this building or whatever. Like, a lot of it is just kind of smattered around, just higgledy-piggledy. I mean, some of them make sense, but others do not. Like, trying to see... Oh, yeah, this tree, for example. This tree is just floating off the ground. Like, you can see it, but it wouldn't be on anything. And that is just kind of the case. Oh, now I'm just noticing this one's not even fully in the ground, and this is in the playable space. So it just kind of goes to show the... kind of the haphazard nature of the design of this map as a whole. And speaking of haphazard, after capturing the first point, we go to the left, and to the left is an area that is, again, extremely clinical. You know, just metal, concrete, there's no, like, glitz and glam, there's no spicy or, well, I wouldn't say spicy, but, you know, there's not, like, gaudy stuff around. In fact, what is interesting is, in this room is you have this like conference room or whatever with a doorway that is surprisingly cohesive with the other side of this doorway, which means that, you know, there could be a conceivable way for somebody to get into this room. And even more weird is it's our old friend, the loading dock sign from Dust Bowl, but it makes absolute sense for it to be here because you have these two grates here. It's just, it astounds me that it actually makes sense for this to be here in relation to these. And you don't even have the problem of the loading gates like being on a higher point or being way too far away from where you would normally drop off something. It's just, it's amazing how that works, considering everything else outside of it is purely nonsense for the sake of nonsense. So before we capture, before Blue would capture the third point, or the second point of Wutville, there's this small, I don't even know if you would call this a flank or just a way for Red to go in through here because, you know, they don't want to get sniped from this notorious sightline here. You have this vent grate, but this vent grate would go to nowhere because the moment you walk in or clip through, it's just more of these nonsensically designed wrapped buildings, so to speak. So this is not doing anything. And then even more so than that is after the first right flank of blue, there is a second right flank of blue that feels almost... Oh wait, that is not the right one. That is the first right flank. The second right flank is just behind that, and it feels as though it's almost a complete inverse of the first one, save for the lower part of the stairs. Just this little section here. It feels almost like copy-pasted, almost, by the fact that it looks very similar. And it even caused me confusion as I was going through it. And what's also interesting, too, is you see this vent right here actually does coincide with the vent right on the other side of the first right flank. Although the distance between them is very small, so them being vent grates for a very small amount of space is a little bit odd to me. Like you'd almost be inclined just to make a window or just a hole at that point instead of just a vent grate. So going on, outside of Red's second spawn, down below, we have this, I don't know if this is even supposed to be a flank, but I guess it's a flank that can completely snake around to the back end of where Red would likely be defending if Blue had captured the second point. And this design is obviously not practical in the slightest because, again, I highly doubt this area it probably experiences rainfall, but it probably doesn't experience rainfall to such an extent that this area would be flooded like this. Obviously, this is just using placeholder assets as compensation. And then to the left, of the second capture point, we have this fenced off area with containers, and this area actually makes some amounts of cohesion, although I would say it'd probably be a logistical nightmare to get these containers in here, considering the fact that the only way to get them in would be to open these gates, these fence gates here. So I don't know how somebody would haul them in. What's also interesting is the architecture of this area and above it with the Manco sign and these windows kind of seems to imply that there is practical architecture outside of this design. Like I said, it kind of makes me think that this is all a prop and not real, so to speak, real in the TF2 sense of its own universe per se. Kind of like how CP de Groot keep, like, you know, there's like things about that map that has subtleties to the fact that it's a mock-up, like it's not an actual like medieval map, so to speak. So with that, we will continue on into Red's second spawn. And like with Red's first spawn is just a dome. A dome that can be easily spawn camped in. Like, notoriously, a lot of them, it's very easy just to have a bunch of... Especially with the fact that there is a small gap of space between the opening of the spawn. Like, you can easily sticky spam this, and they won't have a clue. Especially with, like, being able to stand up on, like, this or whatnot. But that's just all gameplay. Like, gameplay terms, this map is atrocious. But we're not here to talk about gameplay. We're talking about, like, how realistic the design is on a whole. Now, the interesting thing about this copy-pasted spawn is you have these doors, the 9 and 5 doors and a 6 door, but these doors would go to nothing because the moment you clip through is basically nothing. Like, there's this, I don't know what you would call this, like this weird, like, cylindrical, angled building thing that might have some cohesion between it, but I highly doubt it, especially with the 5 door being right next to what would be more of these, like, incomprehensible wrapped buildings, as well as the 6 one kind of just leaning out to here. And there'll be also another comment about the kind of structural integrity of this whole thing as a whole once we get to the final point. But going on, after the third point is captured, we get to the final point. Now, going back to my comment about the stairless, or the railless stair archways, they are patterned throughout in this section of the map, especially here. Like, And some of it can make a little bit of sense, like, this one's obviously, colliding in with this building here. But this one makes some amount of cohesion, other than the fact that it's also clipping into this tree. But this one here, again, doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it's colliding with these sets of fences. And in fact, I almost forgot, but there is this railless stair archway at a very precarious height that is not only colliding with these fences, but on the other side is basically just going to, like, clipping right into the roof of these wrapped buildings and wouldn't really lead into anything. In fact, I'm pretty sure, I guess you can't really see it from inbounds, but yeah, it's a little bit, just, again, feels like it just kind of slapped that on there just for the aesthetic of it over, like, the sensibility of it. Almost forgot about that. So, before we cover the final point of red, of the point, I want to go into the final spawns of red, because the first final spawn of red has basically the same exact copy and paste setup. There might be some more, like, flavor put in here, or different flavors, like you have this cabinet and these, like, boxes and the world map here, but it's basically no different from the other dome-shaped spawns. Also, Red's final right spawn has this interesting setup where you have a turbine, like it's literally the turbine generator asset just slapped here with a weird, like, circular metal mesh surrounding it and a container. Like, I don't know what this section is supposed to serve in relation to anything else. As well as all the radioactive barrels. Like, yeah, I like to store my radioactive barrels next to my turbine generator and container, next to where, like, mercenaries flood in from. And then towards the final, I guess this would be the left spawn of red, is again another dome with the world map and crates. And even more so than that is, like, if you look at the ground level of this, and if you remember where we were at the prior area before the third point, you have this like ceiling thing here, and you can really see just how top heavy this all is, because this is the ceiling and it's being held up by, I guess you would say, like, maybe a few meters of concrete right where the base level of this would be, with all these big giant buildings. So this is probably not structurally sound. This would be this would probably get caved in pretty easily with enough pressure, but I don't really know the relative size, like the weight of these, like, wrapped buildings. So for all I know, they could just be literally made out of corrugated cardboard, for all we know. Now, going back into the pathway to the final point, as I mentioned earlier, you have windows that are buried into the snow, but again, the railways here kind of imply that this is at ground level, so that means that this is also buried into the ground. It's not just buried into the snow, it's quite literally buried into the ground, because the ground level can't be that much higher, that much lower than where the snowfall is. And then the final point is basically this very peculiar chute, which surprisingly does not collide with anything. I even checked, like, you can see it doesn't actually collide with anything else in the map, but what it's surfacing here, I don't know. I don't know if this is supposed to be like a furnace or a kiln or a chimney, because you have these rails here and they kind of just peter off, so maybe it was a way to dump off, like, presents that, like, naughty boys and girls didn't get for Christmas, I guess. Like, maybe that's the through line, but I'm pretty sure if I go back and check the I gotta go back and check the payload. I mean, the payload is just a Christmas themed train with a payload bomb, as it typically is. So what this cart serve beyond that, I don't know. And more to the point is on the upper part, you have an area that can be reachable by just normal walking. Like there's this pathway that you can go up to and just inexplicably fall into. But, you know, considering that there are railless stair archways patterned throughout this map, maybe it's thematically consistent that there's no rails here to keep people from accidentally falling into a bottomless chute. So, yeah. And then the only other comment I have about this map is, as I mentioned before, you know, you have all these tinsel trees just kind of thrown higgledy-piggledy, but then you also have these pipes. And not just angular pipes, you have horizontal pipes. Like, going back a ways, there's a whole bunch here in the Manco sign building. Like, there's plenty right here. I think there's like a array of them that are, yeah, like you have these that are jutting out from the top end of where the final point would be and whatnot. And I don't know if this is just done to like accentuate the silliness of the Wutville aesthetic of the Dr. Seuss book, or just to kind of have like a bit of a contrast between the more like kind of snarky, sarcastic satire of TF2 with the more like jolly, like holiday theming of it. But yeah, this is probably causing a huge load on the performance of this map as a whole. And with that, that will be it for this nightmare of a map. I'm not even going to describe what the name of it is because you already know what it is, but I'm glad that I was able to find anything regarding this map. And that was that for PL_Wutville_event, and boy was it trifling for me to find anything in terms of realism to tackle about it. But I should have expected that with a map as loved to be hated as Wutville, that people would evidently vote for me to cover it. And that will be that for odd architecture maps in a more consistent rotation, as I divvy up my focus now to the Tales from the Borderlands project that I've wanted to do as far back as 2023. As with the playlist for my odd architecture series on Half-Life 2, now that I have enough videos for it, I'll also make a playlist for the TF2 maps that I've covered thus far, if you're so curious about what I've covered beyond this meme of a map. I hope this new year is going well for you so far, and I hope to hear from you when this project is due.